Welcome back to the channel, boys. Fabloonski's coming at your neck with this Cryosthesia 77k build. Now with this build, we're going to utilize the brand new sidearm that came with Season of the Splicer, Cryosthesia. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but we're going to go with it. Now the main reason we're utilizing this is because it also synergizes with the brand new Warlock aspect, Glacial Harvest. Now I don't know if you guys knew that, but if it does proc it, so I figured I would take advantage of that, create a build around it. So this is partly a Cryosthesia build and a Glacial Harvest build, but let me go ahead and jump right in. So obviously with this build, we're going to utilize Shade Binder. For our grenade, we're using the cold snap grenades because they freeze instantly, and that's the whole goal here, is to freeze as many targets as possible. We're going to use Ice Flare bolts. You guys already know what this does. It also gives me 2 fragment slots, which is very important. But we're also going to use Glacial Harvest. Now this is the brand new aspect that comes with this season, or I guess you have to have Beyond Light, but it was made available this season. Freezing targets create stasis shards around the frozen target. Higher tier combatants create more shards. Now the most shards I was able to get spawned was 2 from freezing a boss or just like a champion or something like that. So I don't know if maybe other bosses grant 3 or even 4, but 2 is the most I've ever seen. It also allows you to have 2 fragment slots. So with these two together, you're allowed to have 4 fragments. So let me go ahead and jump over to those. We're using Whisper of Endurance. Slows when your abilities last longer. For those abilities that linger, their duration is also increased. But the main reason I'm using that is because it gives me plus 10 strength. Now we're also using Whisper of Hedrons, gain a weapon damage buff after you freeze a target. Now this takes away 10 strength, this gives 10 strength, so they kind of negate each other. Now we're also using 2 new fragments that came with this season. Whisper of Hunger increases the melee energy gain from picking up a shard. Now I do take a hit to my mobility, which I don't care, but I take a hit to my recovery, which is kind of big for the Warlock because the Warlock is kind of focused around recovery. But that's okay, I still have 100 recovery anyway. Now the next new fragment I'm using is Whisper of Conduction. Nearby stasis shards track to your position. Now this one gives me plus 10 resilience and plus 10 intellect, which is massive. I'm able to have 52 intellect with this build. Now the fact that I don't even have to go pick up the shards now, they just come to me. It's almost like when you're using Thorn, that the little glowing orbs kind of track to you. It's the same thing. The little stasis shards are going to track to you, and then once they get to you, you like claim them, and then you get melee energy. It feels awesome. It kind of it adds a nice flow to the build and to the gameplay, because now I don't have to run around getting all the stasis shards. I can just keep playing and keep fighting, and I'm just gonna get melee energy. I'm just gonna keep absorbing all this melee energy, and it feels great. So obviously I said this in the beginning of the video, but this is a Cryosthesia 77k build. Let's just go over this sidearm real quick. So we got a polygonal rifling, we got particle repeater. Now we got, I guess we can call this an exotic trait. Actually, no, this is not an exotic trait, but this is definitely a custom trait to this weapon. Liquid cooling. Final blows with this weapon enable a charge shot for a short duration, which is 10 seconds. Targets hit by the shot are instantly frozen at the cost of the weapon's entire magazine. Now I believe that with the catalyst, which I don't have unlocked yet, or I haven't like gotten it and grinded out yet, if you shatter the frozen enemy, it actually refills the magazine. So it kind of adds to that loop. You know, it takes away the fact you have to reload, which is very nice. Now the last little mod or perk on it is Polymer Grip. Now the intrinsic trait on it is LN2 Burst, variable trigger. Press and release to fire individual shots, so it just shoots like a regular sidearm. Hold to fire a charge shot when liquid cooling is active. Now that's the stasis shot or the freezing shot or whatever. You have to get a kill first, and then it activates. You'll see this little part in the gun right here is going to start spinning. Then you aim at a target, you hold down the trigger, and it's going to blast the stasis shot and freeze them immediately, which then will proc the whole build. Stasis shards are going to start going everywhere. You're going to get your melee. You're going to use your melee. That's going to proc little stasis shards. This is a constant cycle. Now the rest of my loadout, I'm using a truth teller with blinding nades, auto loading demolitionist. Now you can use really whatever you want here, as long as you have this, that's all that matters. But I figured I would use this, one because it has auto loading, and 2, it has demolitionist, but also it has blinding nades. So not only am I going to be freezing targets with my melee, my grenades, and the sidearm, but I'm also going to be blinding enemies if I remember to even pull it out, because honestly I was having so much fun with this sidearm that I completely forgot that I even had this. But just as a backup plan, if you're getting rushed or if you want to blind the enemies then freeze them, that's always a plan here. So you don't have to use it, but I just thought it was really good. And of course we're just using a rocket because I still think rockets are a lot of fun and they're very good. So let's go over our stats now. We got 23 mobility. I don't care about mobility. We got 39 resilience, which it kind of hurts. I wish I could just give 1 point to this. Take this 1 point recovery, put this here. That's okay. I'll take the 39. I'm not really too worried about resilience. Now we get 101 recovery, which means my class ability cooldown is at 41 seconds. My Rift is on a 41-second cooldown, which is massive for this build and massive for the Warlock. Now we got 43 discipline. I wish this was a little bit higher, but it's okay. You know, I'll take this. I also have demolitionist on my truth teller, although I don't really use it that often. It is there. Now we have 52 intellect, so I'm gonna get my super not very frequently, but definitely more. It's almost like a middle ground. Like I'm gonna get it kind of often. And then we got 102 strength, so my melee is on a 43-second cooldown, but it is going to be much faster than that. So just honestly ignore that. I mean, having 100 is awesome, but you can just ignore the 43 seconds because it's much faster. So now let's go ahead and start with our helmet. We're using a minor recovery mod. We're using our ammo finders here. And then we got blast radius. This is actually on the new seasonal artifact. Become charged with light by rapidly defeating multiple combatants with grenade launchers or rocket launchers. In the event that I do pull up my truth teller and get a massive amount, or not massive amount of kills, but you know, I get a multi-kill with it, I become charged with light. And it only costs 1 energy slot, which is awesome because I think normally, I believe this costs 3 or 4, I'm not too sure, but now it only costs 1 with the seasonal mod, so it's really good. Definitely pick this up if you like using grenade launchers or rockets. And for my exotic piece of choice, we're using Claws of Ahamkar. You guys already know how much I love this exotic. It's one of my favorites in the game, especially for Warlock. This might be my favorite Warlock exotic. Now the armor perk is very simple. It just gives you an additional melee charge, but having an additional melee charge for the Shade Binder, in my opinion, is just so powerful because you can proc so many builds with the freeze, and just the simple fact of freezing enemies is just very powerful in this game. So I absolutely love the fact that now I have 2 of them with this exotic. As for my mods, we're using a minor discipline mod. We're using Sidearm loader because the Cryosthesia does have a pretty slow reload speed. Even with this Sidearm loader, it's still pretty slow. Now we're using Focusing Strike. Grants class ability energy when you cause damage with your melee attack. Now, I'm gonna have my melee so often, so frequently that I figured this just makes sense to use this mod because every time I use my melee, I do damage, I get class ability energy, and I'm going to use my melee a lot, which means that I'm going to get my class ability a lot. And then I also have outreach on, so every time I use my rift, I get melee energy back. So it's just a constant cycle of rift and melee, rift and melee. Now we also have taking charge, so I become charged with light whenever I pick up an orb of power. On my chest piece, we're using a minor intellect mod. Now we got concussive dampener, and then we got heavy-handed. While charged with light, regain half your melee energy when you used a charged melee ability, consuming 1 stack of charged with light. And I do have the secondary perk active while surrounded by multiple combatants. Defeating a combatant with a fusion rifle, shotgun, sidearm, or submachine gun adds ammo to that weapon from your reserves. Or for that weapon to your reserve. Sorry, I read that incorrectly. But now I'm using it for the main perk, so whenever I do use my melee ability, doesn't proc for the first one since I have 2 charges, doesn't proc for the first use, but when I use that second use and I completely run out of melee ability energy or melee charges, I get half of it back, which is amazing. Pair that with the fact that I'm getting stasis charge, which is going to give me increased melee energy. I pop my rift, I get melee energy. It's crazy. I absolutely love this mod, and I love using it on Shade Binder. It's so much fun. On my legs, we're using a recovery mod. Now we got innervation, reduce grenade cooldown each time you pick up an orb of power. This is one way I'm going to be able to, you know, kind of boost up that discipline stat, or not boost it up, but I have a low discipline, 43. So it's just one way I'm going to be able to get my grenade back even faster just by picking up orbs of power. So as long as they're generating them using mastered weapons or popping supers, this is great. Now we're using Rocket Launcher Scavenger. This is also from the seasonal artifact. It only costs 1 energy slot. I highly recommend getting this one because rockets are powerful, and having the fact that this is only 1 energy cost is great. It's great. Now we're also using Charge Up, so I can have 1 additional stack of Charge with Light, which means I can now have 3 stacks of Charge with Light. And on my Warlock Bond, we're using a minor strength mod. Now we're using double outreach mods. Reduces melee cooldown when using your class ability. I said this earlier, but I have 100 recovery and 100 strength. So every time I pop my rift, I get melee energy, and the fact that it's doubled up, it's actually a pretty sizable chunk of melee energy. And then every time I freeze targets, I get rift or class ability energy back. So it's a nice little synergy right there. I absolutely love it. And then we're also using Radiant Light. Casting your super causes nearby allies to become charged with light, but I'm mainly using this for the secondary perk, which gives me plus 20 strength. Now you're wondering, why are you using that? Why can't you just use your other slots? Well, I wanted to open up some of my other mod slots. The fact that this gives plus 20 strength means that I can just use these other mod slots for, you know, discipline or intellect or even just recovery. So this is huge for this build because just the fact that this gives plus 20 strength I can just do so much more with my armor energy slots. And onto my Warlock fashion now. This right here, I absolutely love this little fashion look I created. I did use transmog, which is how I got this helmet. This is like, I really love this helmet because it was one of the first Warlock helmets I saw in D1. I think it was actually an exotic in D1, but I think it looks sick, man. I absolutely love the helmet and the chest piece from the Black Armory, or not even from the Black Armory, from the Scourge of the Past raid, I believe. It's just beautiful armor. It looks like the armored Warlock, and then we got armor on the legs here, and the bond doesn't really matter, but I don't know. I love the way this looks with the black and the red and everything. So if you guys want to know what the shader is, I mean, it's carbon blood on everything, but I'll put it down in the description below. So when I first saw the new Warlock aspect, I was kind of like, I guess it's good, but I don't know. But then I realized, or I forgot, just how easily it is for the Warlock Shadebinder to freeze enemies. Not to mention the fact that this actually synergizes with the new Sidearm Cryosthesia. It's absolutely game changing for, well, if you want to make a melee build at least, it's game changing because you can either freeze enemies with a sidearm and get the little stasis shards to get your melee back, or your grenade, which freezes enemies to get your melee back, or just simply use your melee to get the stasis shards to get your melee back. Then if you do damage to your melee, you use your rift, which then gives you more melee energy, and it's just a constant cycle of just melee's rift, freezing, getting stasis shards, and you don't even have to run over to the stasis shards to get them. They just simply track to you because of the new fragment, and I get increased melee energy because of the new fragment. And if you're using Whispers of Hedrons like I am, then you just have a constant damage buff with the sidearm, and I can't even just, I'm so excited with it because I love it. I love creating builds like this where everything synergizes and everything just feels good. You know, it feels good running around with the melee because I feel like I don't even have to worry about my melee energy. As long as I'm just doing what I have to do and playing the right way with the build, I constantly have my melee available. And when I was using this build for the gameplay footage, I completely forgot about my grenade launcher. Like if I was doing something like a Nightfall or maybe even the Battlegrounds where there's a lot of enemies, honestly, I just feel like I would run around with the sidearm because it's just that much fun. It's actually that potent. And then there's another layer, like I said, with the grenade launcher. So I'm freezing, I'm blinding enemies with the grenade launcher. It is just so good at crowd control, which is fantastic. Now, the only thing that would make this build that much better is if your Cryosthesia is masterworked. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time, and I wanted to put this video out as soon as possible, so I didn't have the time to grind out the catalyst. But the catalyst for this weapon would make this build that much better. So if you're thinking about doing this build, I highly recommend getting the catalyst first. Well, I mean, you can do the build anyway, like I'm using it, it's just fine. Just the catalyst is like the icing on the top, or the cherry on top, whatever it is, because that catalyst seems very powerful for this weapon, and it seems to just like, it kind of like perfects the flow of the weapon, almost like the catalyst for Ariana's Vow, right? Ariana's Vow catalyst gives it, I think it gives it more bullets, and it gives it auto-loading holster, because the reload on that weapon is just so slow. It is painfully slow. So without the catalyst for Ariana's Vow, it almost, I wouldn't say it's unusable, but it's very hard to use. Once you get that catalyst, it's just game changing. Now I wonder if it's the same amount of game changing or has as much impact as Ariana's Vow for this new sidearm. I don't know yet. I have to get the catalyst first, but I think it's going to be very potent. I don't know if it's just going to be as game changing as it was for Ariana's Vow, but definitely try this build out, guys. I love it, so hopefully you guys love it too, and definitely stay tuned for more content. But if you guys like this content, please like, subscribe, and share. It truly helps me out a lot. You can also check out my other videos. Links are in the description below. I have a lot of crazy builds, so go and check that out. And you might as well follow my social media. I have a Twitter and an Instagram, both at @fat_bloonsies. Oh, and I made a TikTok, so definitely go follow that. Same thing, at @fat_bloonsies. But with all that being said, deuces.